She sat at the edge of the abandoned trade station's corridor, her back pressed to cold alloy plating, eyes locked on the tray that had been placed just a few feet away. Steam still rose from the bowl, thick stew, real protein, cut vegetables, warm bread, the kind of meal she hadn't seen since the planetary conscription raids took her family. Her hands stayed on her lap, fingers clenched together, knuckles white with tension. She didn't move. She didn't dare. The human watched from a careful distance, just close enough to be seen, far enough not to crowd her. He didn't speak at first. Just stood there in his loose, utility jacket, hands resting at his sides, the worn insignia of a civilian relief fleet barely visible over his shoulder. His eyes weren't like the others she'd seen. Not greedy, not dismissive, not hostile. They were quiet, steady, watching, not waiting. Still, she didn't move. Her skin was pale lilac, dulled by dust and bruises. Thin lines of older scars trailed her forearms. Her knees were drawn to her chest, bare feet tucked beneath a torn transport gown that barely kept out the chill. She had long, tangled hair, once regal white, now ash-streaked and matted, hiding much of her face. One large eye peeked from behind the curtain of strands, flicking between the food and the man, calculating. She had learned long ago that food came with strings. Sometimes chains. Sometimes worse. "It's yours," the human said finally, his voice low and warm. "No payment. No tricks. Just food." Her body tensed, head twitching slightly at the sound. She had expected a demand, a command, maybe a lie. But his voice carried nothing but soft certainty. Still, she didn't move. A moment passed. Then two. The station's overhead lights flickered with a low hum. Somewhere down the corridor, a maintenance bot wheeled by, ignoring both of them. "I saw you through the cargo feed," he added. "You've been here 3 nights. Haven't touched the trash. Haven't begged. You just sit." She finally looked up, not all the way, but enough that he could see the faint reflection of the warm food in her luminous violet eyes. A heartbeat passed between them. Then she spoke, voice barely audible. "If I eat it, what do you want after?" The question wasn't fearful. It was resigned. A learned ritual. "Nothing," he said, and then crouched slowly so he was at eye level, his hands still visible open. "I just want you to not starve." She blinked, once, twice, and slowly uncurled one foot. Her ankle was swollen, the old slave cuff imprint still bruised into her skin. She shuffled forward just a little. Not toward him, just closer to the tray. The human didn't move. She reached one shaking hand toward the bread. Her fingers paused above it, trembled, then she pulled back. "You don't want to own me?" "No one should own you," he said. She didn't reply. Instead, she touched the edge of the tray, half expecting a zap, or for him to lunge. When neither came, she dragged it closer, so carefully it barely scraped the floor. She lifted the bread with both hands as if it might shatter, then sniffed it. Her eyes closed, just for a second, as the scent hit. The mask cracked. She ate the first piece too fast, choking slightly, then paused and looked at him again, cheeks flushing with shame. But he didn't laugh. Didn't look disgusted. He just stood slowly and said, "I'll be just down that hall. If you want more or anything." As he turned, she surprised both of them by speaking again, quieter this time. "Why?" He paused, looking over his shoulder. "Because someone should have done it for my sister," he said. "And I didn't get there in time." Then he walked away. She didn't touch the stew until he was out of sight. Then, when only the hallway's fading hum remained, she ate. Slowly at first, then faster, tears mixing with the warmth as her hands stopped shaking and her breath slowed. Later that night, long after the lights had dimmed to station rest mode, she crept toward the hall he'd gone down. Her body was still frail, too thin, too weak, but for the first time in cycles, there was a quiet energy in her steps. She found the door cracked open and peeked inside. The room was small, barely enough for a cot, a heater, and a worn display screen flickering with old colony logs. He sat on the edge of the bed, reading. When he looked up, she almost ran. But he didn't speak. Just smiled, tired, understanding. "I didn't eat it all," she said softly. "There's enough for you." His smile widened. "I already had mine." She nodded, glanced around the room. "Is this where you live?" "For now. It's safe. Warm." She hesitated, then stepped inside, still hugging the blanket she'd taken. She sat by the wall, not touching anything, but not retreating either. He didn't question it. They sat in silence for a long time. After a while, she whispered, "What was your sister's name?" He looked at the ceiling for a moment. "Leah. She was always giving food away, even when we didn't have enough." The alien girl, who still hadn't given her name, pressed her forehead to her knees. Maybe she saved someone. I hope so. Silence again. Then, as if it was the hardest thing she'd ever done, she spoke once more, this time not with fear but fragile dignity. My name is Sarah. He nodded gently. Thank you, Sarah. Outside the small quarters, the station pulsed with cold light and forgotten traffic. But inside, something had shifted. A moment not of rescue, not of ownership, but of restoration. Not a trade. Not a debt. Just kindness. And kindness, to a girl who had only ever been seen as currency, felt like the first breath after drowning.